The Grand Assembly Hall was the largest structure ever built by any species in the known galaxy. It floated at the heart of Station Apex, a massive space station where thousands of alien races came together to discuss peace, trade, and the future of civilization. Platforms of every size hung in the air, carrying diplomats from worlds so distant that light itself would take centuries to travel between them. Dr. Lee Tay stood on the human platform, his hands folded behind his back. He was 55 years old, with gray hair and tired eyes that had seen too many political games. As the head of humanity's delegation to the Galactic Union, he had spent 12 years learning how this place worked. 12 years of smiling at creatures who looked down on his species. 12 years of patience. Around him, the assembly buzzed with activity. Beings with scales, feathers, tentacles, and forms that human language could not describe floated past on their platforms. Some nodded at him politely. Most ignored him entirely. Humanity was still new here. Still small. Still considered primitive by those who had traveled the stars for millions of years. Behind Dr. Lee stood Sergeant Yoon Mina. She was 28 years old, with short black hair and sharp eyes that never stopped moving. Her job was simple. Keep the diplomats alive. She wore light armor under her formal uniform, and a weapon was hidden beneath her jacket. She did not expect trouble today, but she always prepared for it. High above them, on the central platform, High Speaker Vorel began the day's session. Vorel was a Torvan, a species known for their love of rules and procedures. His body was thin and pale, with 4 arms that moved constantly as he spoke. His voice echoed through the hall, translated instantly into every language. "We will now discuss the expansion into Sector 12, Vorel announced. "All representatives may submit their claims." Dr. Lee listened quietly. Humanity had no claims to make. They were too new, too weak, too unimportant. But he listened anyway, because listening was how you learned. Far above the assembly hall, Captain Park Jun sat in the command chair of the Horizon. The ship was old by galactic standards, but it was the pride of humanity's small fleet. Jun was 42 years old, with a calm face and steady hands. He had commanded vessels since he was 23, first in Earth's military, and then in the new galactic fleet. Through the main screen, he could see Station Apex floating in the darkness. Around it, thousands of alien ships waited in neat formations. The Horizon and its 4 sister ships looked tiny compared to the massive cruisers of the older species. "Captain," said a voice from behind him, "I am picking up something strange." Jun turned to look at Lieutenant Kim Hana. She was 31 years old, with long hair tied back in a practical knot. As the chief communications officer, she spent her days listening to the endless chatter of the galaxy. She knew the difference between normal noise and something wrong. "What is it?" Jun asked. Hana frowned at her screen. "A signal. Very faint. Buried under a lot of interference." She pressed several buttons, trying to clean up the transmission. "It sounds like a distress call, but it is coming from very far away. Can you identify the source?" "Not yet. I need more time to analyze it." Jun nodded. "Keep working on it. Let me know what you find." Hana returned to her work, and Jun went back to watching the station. He did not know it yet, but that faint signal would change everything. Inside the assembly, the debates continued. Species argued over mining rights and trade routes. Ambassador Keth of the Miron Collective seemed nervous, his 4 eyes blinking rapidly as he stared at a small device in his hands. Sergeant Mina noticed his strange behavior, but said nothing. It was not her place to question alien diplomats. Elder Nos of the Orlathi Council sat on a platform in the shadows, watching everything. The Orlathi were ancient beyond measure. Some said they had seen the birth of the first stars. Nos rarely spoke, but when he did, everyone listened. Today, he simply observed, his gray eyes moving slowly across the crowd. Dr. Lee felt a strange tension in the air. He could not explain it. Everything seemed normal. The speeches were boring. The arguments were predictable. But something felt wrong. His communicator buzzed softly against his wrist. A message from Lieutenant Hana. On the horizon. He read it quietly, keeping his face calm. Possible distress signal detected. Origin. Unknown. Still analyzing. He deleted the message and returned his attention to the assembly. Probably nothing. False signals happened all the time in space. Old satellites. Broken probes. Echoes from long-dead civilizations. But Dr. Lee had learned to trust his instincts. And his instincts told him that something bad was coming. The session continued for 3 more hours. Trade agreements were signed. Border disputes were postponed for future discussion. High Speaker Varel congratulated everyone on another productive day. As the platforms began to disperse, Dr. Lee's communicator buzzed again. This time, the message was longer. Signal confirmed. Distress call from Verath Prime. Miran Colony World. 3 million civilians. Under attack. Requesting immediate assistance. No response from Galactic Fleet. Dr. Lee read the message twice. His heart beat faster, but his face remained still. He looked across the hall at Ambassador Keth, who was now speaking urgently with his aides. Keth looked terrified. Ferrith Prime, a Miran world. Keth's people. Dr. Lee turned to Sergeant Mina. We need to speak with the High Speaker. Mina saw the look in his eyes and nodded. She did not ask questions. She simply followed as Dr. Lee moved toward the central platform. Behind them, the Great Hall continued its peaceful routine. Diplomats laughed and talked. Ships drifted lazily outside the windows. The galaxy turned slowly, unaware that millions of lives hung in the balance. And somewhere in the darkness, on a small blue world called Verith Prime, people were dying while the assembly discussed trade routes. The signal grew louder. The screams grew clearer, and no one was listening. Lieutenant Kim Hana pressed her headphones tighter against her ears. The signal was no longer faint. It was screaming. This is Verath Prime Colony Command. We are under attack. Repeat. We are under attack. Unknown vessels are bombarding civilian centers. Thousands dead. Requesting immediate military assistance. Please, anyone, respond. The voice was desperate. Hana could hear explosions in the background. She could hear crying. She had listened to many distress calls in her career, but none had sounded like this. Captain, she said, her voice tight. You need to hear this. Captain Park Jun walked to her station. She played the recording. His face did not change, but his hands curled into fists at his sides. How long has this been broadcasting? He asked. At least 6 hours, maybe longer. The signal was buried under interference. Someone was trying to hide it. June stared at the screen, showing the peaceful scene outside. Thousands of ships. The greatest military powers in the galaxy. All sitting still, while a world burned. Send everything to Dr. Lee, he ordered. Now, in the Grand Assembly Hall, Dr. Lee Tae received the full transmission. He stood frozen for a moment, reading the reports. 3 million civilians. Orbital bombardment. Cities turned to ash. Children running through streets filled with fire. And the Galactic Fleet had done nothing. He walked toward High Speaker Voral's platform with Sergeant Mina close behind. Other diplomats noticed his movement and grew quiet. Something in his walk was different. Something in his eyes made them nervous. High Speaker, Dr. Lee called out. His voice was calm but carried across the hall. I request an emergency session. Load. Load. Voral looked down at him with mild annoyance. The session has concluded. Dr. Lee. New matters can be raised tomorrow. End quote. 3 million people may not survive until tomorrow. The hall fell silent. Every eye, every sensor, every alien sense focused on the human diplomat. Dr. Lee activated his communicator and projected the distress signal for everyone to hear. The screaming filled the assembly. The explosions echoed off the ancient walls. For 30 seconds, the most powerful beings in the galaxy listened to people dying. When the recording ended, Dr. Lee spoke again. Varath Prime is a Miron colony world. It is under attack at this moment. The Galactic Fleet has the power to stop this. I am requesting immediate military intervention under Article 7 of the Union Charter. High Speaker Vorel shifted uncomfortably. Article 7 requires a formal vote. The process takes 72 standard hours. 72 hours, Dr. Lee repeated slowly. Ambassador Keth of the Miron Collective stood on his platform. His 4 eyes were wet with tears he was trying to hide. Internal matters within the Miron Collective have led to this conflict. It would not be appropriate for outside forces to intervene. Dr. Lee turned to face him. Internal matters? Someone is slaughtering your people. Ambassador. Your own people. Keth looked away. I have my orders. Commander Brix of the Velen Empire rose next. He was a massive creature, built like a mountain with scales of dark red. His voice rumbled through the hall. The Treaty of Neutral Response is clear. The Union cannot deploy military forces into a conflict involving only one member species. It would set a dangerous precedent. 2. Precedent, Dr. Lee said. The word tasted like poison in his mouth. Children are burning alive, and you speak of precedent. We must follow the rules, Vorel insisted. The rules protect us all. Dr. Lee looked around the hall. Hundreds of species. Thousands of representatives. The combined might of countless civilizations. And they sat in their comfortable chairs, while innocent people screamed for help. The rules protect the powerful, Dr. Lee said quietly. They always have. He turned to Elder Nos, who had remained silent throughout. The ancient Orlathi met his gaze, with eyes that had witnessed the rise and fall of empires. Elder Nos, Dr. Lee said. Your people have watched the galaxy for longer than most stars have burned. Is this what civilization means? Standing by, while the helpless suffer? Nos was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke, his voice like wind through dead leaves. The young always believe they can change what the old have accepted. It is both their greatest strength and their greatest flaw. It was not an answer. It was not help. It was nothing. Dr. Lee closed his eyes. He thought of his daughter back on Earth. He thought of his wife. He thought of all the promises he had made about building a better future. Then he opened his eyes and turned off his communicator. Very well, he said. He looked at Sergeant Mina. She nodded, understanding without words. Dr. Lee turned his back on the high speaker. He walked toward the exit corridor. Behind him, Mina followed. On every human platform in the hall, delegates rose from their seats. Aides gathered their belongings. Translators shut down their equipment. One by one, every human in the Grand Assembly walked toward the door. The galaxy watched in terror as humans bolted out of the assembly. High Speaker Vorel called after them. Dr. Lee, where are you going? This is a formal session. You cannot simply leave. Dr. Lee paused at the door. He did not turn around. We are going to Varath Prime. That is madness. Commander Brix growled. You have 5 ships. The attackers have a fleet. You will be destroyed. Perhaps. Then why? Ambassador Keth asked, his voice breaking. Why throw your lives away? Why? Dr. Lee finally turned. His eyes swept across the assembly, meeting the gaze of every being who had chosen to do nothing. Because someone has to. He walked through the door. Sergeant Mina followed. The door closed behind them. For a long moment, the assembly was silent. Then Elder Nos spoke again, his ancient voice filling the hall. You do not understand what you have just witnessed. You showed the humans that your laws protect no one. Now they will show you what their laws demand. No one responded. No one knew what to say. Outside, the 5 human ships broke away from Station Apex. Their engines burned bright against the darkness, as they turned toward distant Verath Prime. They flew toward death. They flew toward fire. They flew because no one else would. The assembly erupted into chaos the moment the humans left. Diplomats shouted accusations at each other. Some demanded that the humans be stopped. Others argued that they should be allowed to go. A few quietly wondered if they should follow. High Speaker Vorel tried to restore order, but his voice was lost in the noise. For the first time in centuries, the Grand Assembly had lost control. Commander Brix of the Velen Empire did not join the shouting. Instead, he sat quietly on his platform, studying tactical reports on a small screen. His red scales darkened with something that might have been worry. "What are you looking at?" asked one of his aides. Brix did not answer immediately. He was reading old battle records from 12 years ago, when humanity had first made contact with the galaxy. A Velen raiding party had attacked a human colony on Mars. 40 warships against 12 human vessels. The humans were using primitive technology. Their weapons were weak. Their shields were thin. By every measurement, they should have been destroyed in minutes. The battle had lasted 6 hours. When it ended, the Velun had lost all 40 ships. The humans had lost 9. But the 3 remaining human vessels had not retreated. They had chased the survivors across an entire star system, hunting them like animals. Brix remembered the reports from the captured Velun soldiers. They had described the humans with a word that did not translate well into other languages. The closest meaning was, "those who do not stop." "Commander?" his aide asked again. Brix turned off the screen. Nothing, just old memories. But the memory stayed with him. 5 human ships against an unknown enemy fleet. It was suicide. Everyone knew it was suicide. So why did Brix feel afraid? Aboard the Horizon, Captain Park June stood at the center of the bridge. His crew moved around him with quiet efficiency. There was no panic. No hesitation. They had known this moment might come since the day they joined the fleet. "Time to Verath Prime?" June asked. 14 hours at maximum burn, Engineer Choi Sung reported. He was 36 years old, with oil-stained hands and eyes that understood machines better than people. "I can push the engines harder, but we risk damaging them." "Push them," June ordered. Sung nodded and returned to his work. He would get every drop of speed from these old engines, even if it killed them. Lieutenant Hana was broadcasting on all frequencies. "This is the human vessel Horizon calling all ships. We are proceeding to Verath Prime to render assistance. Any vessel willing to join us, follow our trajectory. We will not wait." The message went out across the galaxy. It reached thousands of ships, millions of receivers, billions of ears. No one responded. The human fleet flew alone. Dr. Lee Tae sat in his quarters, staring at a small photograph. His wife smiled back at him from the image. His daughter stood beside her, holding a flower she had picked from their garden. He had not said goodbye. There had been no time. Now he might never see them again. He picked up a pen and began to write. Old-fashioned letters on real paper. One for his wife, one for his daughter, one for his brother. Words he should have said years ago. Words that might be all they had left of him. Sergeant Yoon Mina stood outside his door, giving him privacy. Her team of 8 security officers waited in the corridor behind her. They were not enough to fight a war, but they would fight anyway. "Sergeant," one of her officers said quietly, "do you think we can win?" Mina thought about the question. She thought about the enemy fleet waiting at Verath Prime. She thought about the 3 million civilians trapped on that burning world. "I do not know if we can win," she said finally. "But I know we will not lose by running away." It was not a comforting answer. But it was honest. Back at Station Apex, the news had spread beyond the assembly. Every network in the galaxy was showing footage of the human ships departing. Commentators struggled to explain what they were seeing. "This is clearly a political statement," one analyst said. "The humans are trying to embarrass the Union." "It is suicide," another argued. They will be destroyed before they even reach the planet. Perhaps they know something we do not, a third suggested. Perhaps they have a plan. None of them understood. They could not understand. Ambassador Keth watched the broadcasts alone in his quarters. Tears streamed down his face. His people were dying, and he had been ordered to say nothing. His government had chosen politics over lives, and now these strange creatures from a distant blue world were flying to their deaths to save strangers. He picked up his communicator and called his homeworld. "This is Ambassador Keth. I am resigning my position. Do not attempt to contact me again. Amen." Then he walked to the docking bay and boarded his personal shuttle. He was not a warrior. He had never fired a weapon in his life. But he could not stay here, while others sacrificed everything. His small shuttle turned toward Vareth Prime and began to fly. 12 hours into the journey, Lieutenant Hana's sensors detected the enemy fleet. Her face went pale as the numbers appeared on her screen. "Captain," she said, "I have contact with hostile forces." "How many?" Hana swallowed hard. 63 warships, heavy cruisers, military grade. The bridge went silent. 63 against 5. Even by human standards, those were terrible odds. Captain June stood perfectly still for a long moment. Then he turned to face his crew. "I will not order anyone to die," he said quietly. "If anyone wishes to leave, I will not stop them. There is no shame in choosing to live." No one moved. No one spoke. Engineer Sung broke the silence. "The engines are ready, Captain. We can go a little faster if you want." Four. June almost smiled. "Almost. Take us in," he ordered. Maximum speed. The human fleet burned toward Vareth Prime, toward 63 enemy ships, toward almost certain death. And for reasons they could not explain, the watching galaxy held its breath. The human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Vareth system. What they saw made even the veterans go quiet. Wreckage filled the space around them. Broken ships drifted in the darkness. Escape pods floated with their lights dead. Bodies tumbled slowly through the void, frozen in their final moments of terror. On the planet below, cities burned. Great pillars of smoke rose from the surface, visible even from orbit. The attackers had been thorough in their destruction. Captain Park Jun stared at the scene. His hands gripped the arms of his chair until his knuckles turned white. "Lieutenant Hana," he said, "open a channel to the enemy fleet." Hana's fingers moved across her console. "Channel open, Captain." A harsh voice crackled through the speakers. "Unidentified vessels. You have entered a restricted combat zone. This is internal Miran business. Withdraw immediately, or you will be destroyed. Thank you for watching. I'm C. All, and in 46. June leaned forward. His voice was calm and clear. "This is Captain Park Jun of the human vessel Horizon. We are here to render assistance to civilian populations under attack. Stand down your weapons and cease bombardment." Laughter came through the channel. 5 ships? You dare threaten us with 5 ships? Human? We have 63 vessels. Turn around and go home. This is your only warning." June cut the channel. He looked at his crew. They looked back at him with steady eyes. "Battle stations," he ordered. The human fleet moved forward. What followed would later be called the 14-hour hell. It was the most brutal battle the galaxy had witnessed in generations. The humans did not fight like other species. They did not hold formations. They did not follow predictable patterns. They attacked from every angle, every direction, every shadow. They were chaos in the shape of ships. The Horizon led the charge, drawing fire from the largest enemy vessels. Missiles streaked toward them, and Lieutenant Hana worked the defensive systems with desperate speed. Explosions bloomed around them, close enough to shake the hull. "Shields at 60%, she reported. "Keep firing," June ordered. Engineer Choi Sung worked miracles in the engine room. Power flowed from life support to weapons. Air grew thin on the lower decks. Crew members put on breathing masks and kept fighting. "I need more power to the forward batteries," June called down. "You will have it," Sung replied. His hands bled from torn wires and broken panels. But he did not stop. He could not stop. The smaller human ships flanked the enemy formation, striking at their weaker vessels. They moved like wolves, hunting a herd, picking off stragglers and damaged ships. The enemy tried to trap them, but the humans slipped away each time. On the surface of Vareth Prime, millions of Miran civilians hid in underground shelters. They listened to the explosions above them and prayed to gods who seemed to have abandoned them. Then a new voice came through their emergency channels. A human voice, Lieutenant Hana. "Survivors of Varath Prime. This is the human fleet. We are engaging enemy forces in orbit. Please transmit your locations so we can coordinate protection for your shelters." The response came immediately. Thousands of signals, millions of voices, all crying out at once. Hana sorted through the chaos, mapping every shelter, every hidden community. She directed human strikes against enemy ground forces, threatening civilian positions. She became the connection between the fleet and the planet, a lifeline made of radio waves and hope. Dr. Lee Tae broadcast to the galaxy from his small console. He showed the battle. He showed the burning cities. He showed children being pulled from rubble by Miran rescue workers. He showed everything. "This is what your silence costs," he said to the watching universe. "Remember this. Remember what happens when good people do nothing." The battle raged on. After 6 hours, the humans lost their first ship. It was called the Compass, a small vessel with a crew of 42. It was overwhelmed by 5 enemy cruisers and torn apart. There were no survivors. After 10 hours, they lost 2 more. The Spirit and the Promise, destroyed while covering civilian evacuation shuttles. Their crews fought until the last second, buying time for strangers to escape. Sergeant Yoon Mina led boarding parties onto damaged enemy vessels. Her team of 8 had become 5, then 3. They captured ships from the inside, turning enemy weapons against their own fleet. Mina herself killed 11 enemy soldiers in hand-to-hand combat, her armor scorched and cracked. By hour 12, the Horizon was barely holding together. Half its weapons were gone. The shields had failed completely. Smoke filled the corridors, and fires burned in the lower decks. Captain June sat in his chair, blood running from a cut on his forehead. His uniform was torn. His voice was hoarse from shouting orders. "Captain," Hana said quietly, "the enemy flagship is moving toward the evacuation zone. If it gets through, it will destroy the refugee shuttles." June looked at the tactical display. The flagship was massive. The Horizon had nothing left that could stop it. Nothing except the Horizon itself. "All hands," June announced. "Prepare for impact. We are going to ram the enemy flagship." No one argued. No one hesitated. The Horizon turned toward the flagship and accelerated. Engineer Sung gave the engines everything they had left. The ship groaned and screamed, but it flew true. The enemy tried to evade, but they were too slow. The Horizon struck the flagship's bridge at full speed. Metal tore through metal. Fire consumed both vessels. Sergeant Mina found Captain June in the wreckage. He was unconscious, but alive. She dragged him through the burning corridors and into an escape pod. They launched into space just as the flagship exploded behind them. When the flames cleared, the enemy fleet had lost 41 ships. The remaining 22 were retreating at full speed, abandoning the battle they had expected to win easily. The humans had won, but at what cost? Of 5 ships, only 1 remained functional. Hundreds of crew members were dead or wounded. The Horizon was gone, scattered across space in a million pieces. Sergeant Mina floated in her escape pod, holding the unconscious captain. She watched the enemy flee. She watched the evacuation shuttles continue their work. Then a new fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel. Hundreds of ships, bearing flags from a dozen different species. They filled the sky with light. Elder Nos's voice came through every channel. "We are late, but we are here." The galaxy had finally woken up, and the humans, broken and bleeding, had shown them the way. The Allied fleet arrived to find the battle already over. Hundreds of ships from dozens of species spread across the Vareth system. But the humans had already done what they could not. Elder Nos stood on the bridge of his ancient vessel, watching the rescue operations begin. Medical ships descended toward the planet. Engineering crews worked to stabilize damaged infrastructure. Search teams looked for survivors in the wreckage of destroyed cities. But everywhere they went, they found humans already working. Sergeant Yoon Mina stood guard at a refugee camp, her armor still blackened from the boarding actions. She had not slept in 30 hours. She had not eaten in 20. But she refused to leave her post until every civilian was safe. Lieutenant Kim Hana coordinated communications between the Allied fleet and the surface teams. Her voice was the connection that held everything together. She translated between species, directed rescue efforts, and kept everyone moving in the right direction. Engineer Choi Sung worked alongside alien engineers to repair critical systems. His hands were bandaged, his face was burned, but he laughed and joked with beings he had never met before. They did not speak the same language, but they understood each other perfectly. Captain Park Jun woke up in a medical bay. His first words were about his crew. His second words were about the civilians. His third words were a request to return to duty. The doctors told him to rest. He ignored them and walked to the observation deck, where he watched the rescue ships come and go. Sergeant Mina found him there an hour later and stood beside him in silence. "How many did we save?" he asked. 1.2 million survivors confirmed so far, she said. "They are still finding more." She said. 1.2 million out of 3 million. June closed his eyes. 1.8 million dead. Because the assembly took too long. Because they cared more about rules than lives. Mina did not argue. There was nothing to argue about. Dr. Lee Tae addressed the arriving diplomats in a temporary shelter on the planet's surface. His formal robes were torn and dirty. His hair was gray with ash. But his voice was strong. 3 million people lived on this world, he said. 1.2 million survived. Your debate cost 1.8 million lives. I want you to remember that number. I want you to say it to yourself every night before you sleep. 1.8 million. That is the price of your procedures. That is the cost of your neutrality. No one responded. No one could. Ambassador Keth stood at the back of the crowd. He had arrived in his small shuttle during the final hours of the battle. He had helped evacuate civilians from a burning hospital. He had carried children through smoke-filled streets. For the first time in his life, he had done something that mattered. He walked forward and knelt before Dr. Lee. "I am sorry," he said. "My government ordered me to say nothing. I followed those orders. I was a coward." Dr. Lee looked at him for a long moment. Then he reached down and helped Keth to his feet. "You came when others did not. That counts for something." The aftermath of the battle changed everything. The Miran Collective fell into civil war within weeks. The faction responsible for the attack was overthrown. New leaders emerged who promised never to let such a thing happen again. Ambassador Keth became one of them. High Speaker Vorel resigned from his position in disgrace. His precious procedures had failed when they were needed most. The Treaty of Neutral Response was abolished and replaced with something called the Verath Accords. Under these new rules, any attack on civilian populations would trigger an immediate response from the Union fleet. No votes, no debates, no delays. But the biggest change was in how the galaxy saw humanity. They had always viewed humans as young and foolish. a species that had barely learned to travel between stars, playing at civilization. Humans were tolerated, sometimes mocked, often ignored. They were considered too primitive to matter. Now the galaxy understood the truth. Humans were not conquerors. They did not want empire or power. They were happy to sit quietly at the back of the assembly, learning and growing at their own pace. But when innocence suffered, when the powerful chose comfort over justice, when the rules protected only those who made them, humans became something else entirely. They became the species that ran toward the fire. 6 months after the battle, Captain June stood on the bridge of a new ship. It was called the Horizon 2, built by the Miron Collective as a gift of gratitude. It was faster, stronger, and more beautiful than its predecessor. His crew had grown. Not just humans now. Volunteers from a dozen species had asked to serve with them. They wore new uniforms that combined human designs with elements from their own cultures. They were something new, something the galaxy had never seen before. Lieutenant Hana sat at her communications station, older and wiser but still sharp. Engineer Sung worked in an engine room 3 times the size of his old one, surrounded by technology that would have seemed like magic a year ago. Sergeant Mina commanded a security force of 50, drawn from across the Union. Dr. Lee had returned to Earth to be with his family, but he sent messages often, always ending with the same words: keep them safe. 2. A signal came through the communications array. Hana listened for a moment, then turned to Captain June. Captain, we are receiving a distress signal. Colony world. In the outer territories, under attack by unknown forces. June looked around his bridge. Human faces, alien faces, all of them watching him with the same expression. Ready, willing, unafraid. He smiled for the first time in months. Set course, he ordered. Maximum speed. The Horizon 2 turned toward the darkness and burned bright. The galaxy no longer watched in terror when humans moved. They watched in hope, because they had learned something important during the fire and blood of Varith Prime. They had learned that in a universe full of ancient powers and careful politicians, there was one species that would always answer when others called for help. One species that would sacrifice everything for strangers. One species that would run toward the fire when everyone else ran away. Humanity had shown them what courage looked like, and the galaxy would never forget.